Welcome and thank you for joining us. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. On the program today, we're going to be talking about healing. That's right, healing, you say? Well, what does that mean? Well, it depends on how you feel. So we're going to talk about how you can heal by feeling through emotional intelligence from a place known as JoyWork Mind-Body Therapies. On the program today, I'd like to welcome back a guest we've had on the program before, the owner of JoyWork Mind-Body Therapies, Keelan Anderson. Keelan, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Hello, thank you.
Now, tell us about this feeling of healing. That's kind of cute.
Healing is feeling.
Yes.
Yeah. It's the idea is that often what blocks healing is blocking emotions. Mm-hmm. Is not actually knowing that we're having emotions and not actually accepting them and not actually releasing them. And so in order to heal, we actually need to feel.
Mm-hmm. Now, it's being able to feel that you also increase your emotional intelligence. What exactly is emotional intelligence?
Right. Emotional intelligence is an awareness that you're not your emotions. So when we're having emotions, when emotions come up and we are having them unconsciously, or we're having them without an awareness that it's an emotion that we're having as opposed to just who we are, then we don't have any choice about our actions related to that emotion. And we don't have any choice about taking actions that might be healing in the moment as opposed to making the situation perhaps worse. So emotional intelligence is, again, the awareness that you're not your emotions.
Now, do you think that people suppress their emotions a lot and they don't tend to really want to feel them?
I do. So I'm a body worker, and on my table, mostly what comes up out of people and out of their bodies are repressed emotions. So we're actually holding things in and holding things back, and we might even be in a state where we're not even aware that we even had the emotion. It's so repressed that it doesn't even come up on the radar.
Now, why do you think people hold emotions back or don't express them or allow them to just kind of flow?
Because we live as many different parts. So I think we hold emotions back because parts of us are perhaps have had experiences where we had that emotion in the past and created pain, or we have beliefs about ourselves and about who we are that don't include those kind of emotions. For example, I'm a person that maybe doesn't allow myself to have anger. Maybe I've had experiences where I expressed anger and I got a response that caused me pain, therefore I learned not to express it or not to have it. And if the pain was great enough in that experience, then I might not even allow the anger to surface as anger, so I don't even know it exists. It's so repressed.
I know it's interesting what you were saying earlier, Keelan, is that you said that in emotional intelligence, it's the idea that you are aware that you are not your emotions.
Right.
And it's so interesting how you hear people actually express exactly what you're talking about there. You know, I'm feeling sad today, so I'm a sad person. You know?
Exactly.
Feeling angry, so I'm an angry person, when in fact you're just feeling these things and you're not those things. But what do you think would be the inherent, danger, for lack of a better word, as people express themselves as their emotions?
I think the the difficulty with not being aware that you're having an emotion and identifying with an emotion as if it were you, the difficulty with that is that you don't realize that the emotion is temporary. And so often you make it last longer by identifying with it. And also, you limit your choice about how you respond to having the emotion when you think it's you. So, for example, if I go from feeling angry to I'm an angry person, then the fact that I identify with it limits my choice of how I respond to it and the behaviors that I have with it, because suddenly it's my identity. Suddenly I have to be that person, as opposed to being a person that sometimes feels angry and sometimes feels other things.
Now, it's fascinating to realize, to let our listeners know that you graduated from the Oregon School of Massage. Mm-hmm. You were also Oregon Health Sciences University School of Nursing, as well as Reed College, which is a very well-known college throughout the United States. So you've really been around people who are in the healing arts, but sometimes those people aren't as emotionally intelligent as they need to be in this kind of practice. Tell us about that a little bit.
Right. Well, yeah, absolutely. I think especially in, so I was a nurse for about, I've been out of the field for maybe 8-9 years, and but when I was in nursing, I found actually that there was a lot of, to survive being a nurse, I found that I was often asked to repress emotion and not have emotion around the situation. And I think that does make those, it gets in the way of being a healer when I myself have to compartmentalize in that way just to survive the job. So,
well, I thought it'd be important for people to note that, because just like you were saying in nursing, that is so difficult to be in that capacity. Having my own experiences in hospitals, to realize what you have to deal with day to day, that's not an easy thing to be creating emotional intelligence around.
Absolutely. It's a very stressful job, and whether you're in the hospital because you're ill or you work in the hospital, I think it's a pretty stressful environment. Yeah.
Now, you have what are known as 5 ways to increase your emotional intelligence. Why don't we talk about each one of those a little bit? Sure.
So I guess where you'd start is the first one is wondering, how a person, so if emotional intelligence is the awareness that you're not your emotions, well, how do you start having awareness of how you're feeling? And the first thing I would suggest is, it's not very hard, is to find some perspective. And the way one does that is just by having more moments of awareness throughout the day. The traditional way to raise one's awareness about one's internal state is meditation, but often people these days have a kind of a knee-jerk reaction to meditation. It's kind of like telling you to exercise or eat right, or, these are things we want to do, but it just seems like too much work sometimes, or it seems like a big regimen. And what I suggest is that meditation can be extremely simple. Don't even call it meditation. Just call it sitting down for a moment. So it can happen any time. It can happen at the stoplight while you're waiting for the light to change, while you're in traffic. And if you just spend, you can just take that 2 minutes and notice how you're feeling. Notice what's going through your head, and just take a moment of quiet. And any time that we can take a moment to notice our state of being, how we are in that moment, this creates awareness that we're not what we think or feel, because we notice the transience of thoughts. We notice how feelings come and go.
I always found that interesting, that, when you would have a thought that you find yourself stuck on, is to realize, how did I come to that thought in the first place? And I think one of a good exercise for our listening audience out there who might get a little crazy and experience road rage because they're late to an appointment or whatever it may be, or rush hour traffic, is feel, why did this rage boil up in me in the first place? What are they doing out there that's got me so upset? And then kind of trace that back. That's what you're suggesting, right?
Sure. Well, sometimes that question actually is too difficult because the reason that we feel that rage is too buried sometimes. So I actually think it's more useful to accept that you're having that feeling. In a way, just make room for it. Just say, wow, I'm having that rage. But the more awareness that you have that the rage is not you, that it's just something you're feeling in the moment, then the easier it is to be like, all right now this traffic jam is really pissing me off, and I really want to move forward, and that's okay. And in a way, the more space you have between you and your emotion, the easier it is to do that, and then it's not as consuming.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah, because often the why, that gets to be pretty sticky, and in the middle of the emotion, the why can be, it's your brain isn't working how it normally would be in that reasoning state when you're feeling a really strong emotion, and so that why question is harder to get at in that moment.
It seems like you would be working more from the reptilian brain at that point.
Absolutely. You just want to hit something, you want to drive into the car in front of you, which are options, but probably ones you don't really want to choose because they're going to make the situation.
It's pretty funny how we make decisions when we throw that emotional blanket in front of us, but we don't identify with the fact that it is an emotional trigger that's happening at the same time.
Right, because that's why you're doing it. Absolutely.
Now, how can a person learn to express their emotions with more freedom?
So what I think that something that really helps is for one to have experiences where they actually are experiencing the moment in their body. And so a lot of things that help with that are actually getting body work. We have a lot of different types of body work, and what can happen on the body work table is the body has an opportunity, an hour or so, where you actually are present in your body. You're feeling what your body is feeling, and your body has the opportunity to express things that might otherwise be blocked as we go throughout our day and we're not really paying attention to the body. So it's a time when the body itself gets its moment to express regardless of what our agenda is per se.
Tell us, Kaylin, when somebody comes to Joywork Mind Body Therapies, what types of things do you actually effectuate when they're there as a client?
Okay. So I do a type of body work called craniosacral therapy. Craniosacral therapy works directly with the nervous system, and it works with a motion that is understood to be made by the cerebral spinal fluid that surrounds your brain and spinal cord. And the motion of this fluid actually moves all areas of your body. So it moves the bones around your brain and spinal cord, and then those bones in turn move all parts of your body. And it's understood that where this motion is altered or blocked or absent in a permanent way, that's a part of your body that is blocked off in some way from your nervous system's normal capacity for running that area and adding healing to that area and making sure nutrients are getting there and making sure motion is normal. And so often when we have an emotion that we're repressing or an area that has been injured or tension, it could just be simple tension, those things will make it harder for the nervous system to work in that area. And so the body work that I do goes to those areas where that motion is altered and works with the motion to reestablish a more optimal rhythm. And then basically what happens is the body, as it's lying on the table and I'm doing this, the body goes, oh, wait, there's this part of me that I haven't really been paying attention to, that I haven't been aware of. I'm going to go down to that part and see what's up. And when the body goes down to that part and see what's up, sometimes emotion is released. Sometimes the body part gets to move in a way that it needs to move that then frees it up from whatever it was holding. All sorts of things can happen.
So that brings us to a really interesting, question for our listeners out there, Kaylin, is that it's possible to trap emotions in areas of the body. And if that's true, how long can a person trap emotions? Can it go in layers over, days, months, years?
Oh, I believe so. I believe that actually that most of the things that I see that are released from areas of the body, and people are having emotion on the table, a lot of grief, sometimes anger, that those things are pretty old, it seems like. Sometimes people have an awareness that, I have this emotion coming up, and when they choose to talk to me about it and they have any content with it, often it's about something that's pretty old. Unless they're working through, for example, a grief experience that's fairly new, in which case we have habits in our bodies for where we hold this emotion, but the emotion that we're storing there can be released, I think, perhaps more easily because it's not been there that long. So say you've just lost a parent, there are certain areas in the body where you might be holding that grief, but it's not entrenched per se because you're still in the grieving process.
When you've had people come see you, kind of give us an idea, what are some of the oldest, emotions that were held on to a person that you've experienced?
What are some of, ask that one more time.
Okay, someone has come to see you in your experience. What has been some of the oldest emotional woundings you have experienced with someone that you've worked with?
Oh, I have had people go back to the womb, back to birth, and I have had clients who went, back to some other life or some other time. Wow. Yeah. So
and how do you arrive at those conclusions? I mean, how does that happen when you're working with them?
Well, it arises from them. So if someone gets on the table and they don't speak or they don't have anything coming up that they want to share with me or that they need to work through, then that's how that healing happens, and that's fine. And then sometimes they have imagery come up, and so we'll discuss the imagery, and sometimes that will lead to a memory, or sometimes there's a direct memory there. And so the person on the table, I can be working in an area of their body and they're having something come up and they may choose to share it with me, and they'll be like, I'm thinking about this time, and it's actually, and some people, it's a revelation that they're having a past life memory, and so we work through that. And for some people, it's something they've experienced before, and they'll actually say, oh, this is from this past life.
Mm-hmm. Caitlin, it must be pretty amazing to do what it is that you do, because when it comes to emotions and emotional intelligence for people, a lot of times, especially in a society like America, we have to hold strong and hold it together. We're not allowed to fall apart, so to speak.
Absolutely.
And, for someone like you to be able to work with people in a way that they feel comfortable kind of just letting it all hang out, that's pretty amazing for someone like you to be doing that.
Absolutely. It is a privilege to provide the space for people to be themselves.
Uh-huh.
And it is difficult in our society to be out in the world and to be fully oneself.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of ideas about how people are supposed to be in America. And depending on, how important those ideas are to us, we show more or less of ourselves out in public. And sometimes those ideas can be so important to us that even internally to ourselves, we don't always admit all of our parts to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, absolutely. It's an honor to provide a space for them.
Have you made a lot of grown men cry?
I do have men come and cry, yes.
What do you do that causes something like that? I could just imagine a big burly guy getting off of a Harley, you ain't going to break me, and then can I get a tissue?
Well, it's the work that I do is absolutely an invitation for the person, so nobody does anything in my office that they are not looking for on some level. And so if someone honestly is looking for healing and they're open to however that might happen, then that experience is possible. But I don't push anyone anywhere. All I do is invite.
Oh, okay. So
Absolutely.
Do you work with a series of questions? Is it massage? Give us kind of an idea what it is that you do. Is it touch? Do you touch?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So if someone's coming for a craniosacral appointment, I do have 3 things I do, and they are somewhat separate. They overlap a little bit, but somewhat separate.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone's coming for a bodywork appointment, they say they want to try the craniosacral therapy. My hands are my hands are on the body. The person's clothed. They're lying on a bodywork table in my office. And my hands are moving, but they're moving in such a way that they're moving with an internal rhythm. And so sometimes people aren't actually aware that my hands are moving. And so I will move them to different areas around the body, but generally where I'm at, my hand seems still, even though I can tell that it's moving with this internal motion. And so that's sort of what people, that's what it looks like. Now, what people experience on the table just runs the gamut. Some people check out and they're asleep and they're having an internal experience in that way. And then some people feel twinges in their body. Some people feel the pains they came in with changing. Some people need to move around. All different things happen when I do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And as far as the talking goes, I also do this thing called NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, and there are a series of exercises that help us get out of our own way. They help us leave behind false identities and false beliefs that we perhaps don't realize we're carrying that we don't want to carry. And so if anything like that comes up on the table, sometimes the person will choose to do one of those exercises, and we can actually help them leave that behind.
Mm-hmm.
And then people also come to me for a separate session, not a bodywork session, but an NLP session where they sit in a chair and we go through the exercises.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, I also understand Rising Star. What does that mean?
Mm-hmm. So Rising Star Healing is a different modality that I do that is basically a chakra clearing. And so it's an energetic healing, and I go down the chakras, and the energy comes in and it does a clearing for the person.
Mm-hmm.
So it's purely energetic.
It's interesting to think, Keelan, that, 10 years ago people would look at this and say, I don't know if there's any legitimacy in all of this kind of work here.
Right.
And, 20 years ago they would have thought you were nuts. This has no business being in this community whatsoever.
Right.
But people are beginning to understand, as science takes its leaps forward and we begin to, really understand the biodynamics of the human body, that this is probably makes more sense than the other routes that we used to take, which is, becoming heavily medicated because of depression
right.
and the like, or, maybe drinking yourself into oblivion. But the fact is, when you take a look at what you're talking about or what we've been sharing with our listeners today, this all just makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that people have run into a lot of dead ends with problems with what you're talking about, obviously with addiction, and with, if you're using Western type medicine to treat something that's not really something that Western medicine is good at treating, then you got to try something else. If I break my arm, I'm going to go see, somebody who's going to put it back in place and put a cast on it. That makes perfect sense. But as far as my feelings about breaking my arm, my fears about using that arm in the future, my fears that might have come up because I broke the same arm when I was, a child, all of that stuff, perhaps needs another outlet that's not really going to be found at that doctor who puts the cast on.
Exactly. So, it's really fascinating work. Now, what would you suggest to our listeners on a daily basis they can do to just feel better, as far as allowing emotions to run free and come in and out and just really enjoy the day as it really is?
Right. The simplest thing that one can do, I think, to sort of even out or manage emotions on a daily basis is to watch what information you're taking in and how that makes you feel. So this includes who we talk to. This includes the media we take in. For example, this radio show, when you listen to this show, does it make you feel hopeful? Does it make you feel better about life? Does it make you feel like things are possible, that things could change, that things could get better? Or, are you taking in media that makes you feel like, everything's awful and you're never going to get anywhere and you're always going to be in pain, and so is the whole world? So I think that that's something that's really easy to do, to see, when I talk to this person, the information I get from this person, the kind of conversation I have, does that make me feel better or does it make me feel worse? And making those decisions throughout the day, you can actually increase the times that you're interacting with media or a person or whatever it is, and having that make you, choosing those things to make you feel better. If you do more of those throughout the day, then you're going to feel better.
I just thought of something funny that I thought our listeners should maybe do in some cases as they come to visit you. Is this actually happened quite a while ago. I ended up with a little bit of a flu, so I was laid up in bed for a day.
Sure.
So my wife comes and she brings me one of those magazines that you would find there at the checkout stand in the supermarket. So I'm flipping through this magazine, looking at all the celebrities, what they're wearing, what they're not wearing, where they're vacationing, and on and on. And I could just feel this stress and this rage and this anxiety, and I'm like, this is driving me nuts. And it was funny because then I get to the back of the magazine, and there was a crossword puzzle. And once I started working on that, I noticed all the stress in my body just calmed down. And I think it was fascinating to have that many triggers go off as I was flipping through these pages and trying to look back and reflect on the fact, what is triggering me about all of these different things? So if you really want to find out if you got stuff that's in there, stuff in the basement, so to speak, pick up one of those magazines, and I'm certain you're going to have all kinds of feelings.
Absolutely. And that is emotional intelligence right there. You know, you're reading the magazine and you realize, I'm having all these things come up, but you're not identifying with them. You're watching them come up and arise. And then you're saying, actually, I'm doing this. I feel better doing this. I like doing the puzzle. And your body's trying to heal from having the flu. It takes a lot of energy to get really upset, and your body needs that energy to heal your sickness, right, your temporary illness that you're having. And so if you did things that made you feel better during that time, your body's more rested, your nervous system has more ability to attend to the immune system as opposed to attending to the emotion that you're building.
Now, I think it's important also for our listeners to know, even though they may not be in Portland, Oregon, where they can come and visit with you if they decide to, but you have worked with people over the phone? I
have. I work over the phone, and I can work on Skype.
Okay.
So, I've done NLP sessions on Skype. I have some clients as far away as New York, in that area.
Oh, okay.
We work together on Skype,
And I thought what would also be important, too, is to let the listeners out there know that you're also the author of the book Crowheart, which is Becoming Unwounded, which was a memoir about your own healing experience, is that what led you to become a health practitioner and the way that you practice health?
Yeah, it's actually the story of the start of me going in that direction. So it's the story of some intense healing that I did, some intense exploration of my own issues through body work, through spiritual growth, through seeing doctors. And it was an intense period about, it's maybe 5 or 6 years ago now that I went through. And I talk about sort of what I learned through that whole experience and the transformation that was able to take place. And then, yes, I came out of it deciding I wanted to go into healing and work in this way so that others could perhaps have the liberation that I experienced.
Just listening to you, Keelan, I would have never thought for a minute that you ever had a single problem in your entire life.
Well, I do tend to not dwell on the problems. But yes, it's, I guess because, again, when you get to a certain point in your healing, there's a realization that you're not the only person that's suffering in this way.
Right.
And so the sense that everyone has their story and everyone has their pain. And even though it's different than my pain and my story, it's not comparable. It's all equally valid. And so suddenly my story is not, I'm not the only person in pain, and suddenly the story just doesn't seem as important. It's about all of our pain and about what we're going to do with that pain in order to change it, in order to grow and move to a place where life is full of joy and possibility as opposed to suffering. I can say, actually, that my book itself, as we're talking about taking things in that make you feel better, I wrote the book, specifically designed it in such a way that if you read it, it's going to be a transformative experience for you. It's written in the first person. It deliberately does not concentrate on the problem but the solution, and so as you read it, you're having an experience of moving toward the solution and moving toward change and possibility.
You know, you had just said something that I thought was really important, and that is that when we have an emotional wounding, let's say that it could be a relationship you're in, breaks up, and you were talking about the story. Now, what are your thoughts on this? It was just a thought that I had, that the more you relate your story around what happened, the more power you give that emotion to thrive, which is not really what you want to have happen. Would you say in your experience that that's true, that the story is actually like fuel for the emotion?
Absolutely. Yep. And that's part of sort of that awareness of what you're thinking. You know, as soon as we can sort of get some awareness of what we're thinking, we realize what stories we're repeating over and over again. And for example, say you saw a movie, and the movie just made you feel awful. You know, it made you feel frightened and trapped or whatever it was, and you get out of that movie and you're like, thank God that movie's over. I'm never going to see that again. It's awful. Well, we don't realize that we show ourselves these movies that make us feel awful over and over again all day. You know, and we can, and it doesn't necessarily have to make us feel awful. They could just be defeating. They could be movies about like, well, when I was a kid, everybody told me I was stupid, therefore I can't really, you know, I shouldn't do anything in the world. I can't do these things that I want to do because I'm not smart enough. And so we tell ourselves that over and over again when it's based on some old program that somebody told you or some experience that you had, and it's a story you picked up. And you've got a choice about what story you tell yourself. And wouldn't it be more useful to tell yourself a story about maybe it doesn't matter how smart I am or whether I'm stupid or not or what people think about that. Maybe I could just try this thing and see how it goes.
It's pretty amazing how much we place our value through the attitudes and the opinions of others, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Did you find yourself that way before you wrote your book?
Absolutely, yeah. I think that probably the biggest challenge for healing is learning self-validation. You know, we really don't get a lot of messages that validating oneself is valued or possible or a good thing to do. We get a lot of messages that we have to ask other people how we're doing.
It's funny because I just had this image of that Saturday Night Live skit of Smalley, and they had Michael Jordan on the program, and the guy was trying to say, you know, just go ahead and let it out, and Michael Jordan's just smiling. He says, but I really love my life. He says, no, come on now, let's go with it. Say, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me.
Right.
And then even funnier, I sometimes love using movie references, but the other one was a Sylvester Stallone movie. It was Demolition Man. And it's in the future, and it was funny because they show this scene where this guy is standing in front of like an ATM machine, which can also work as, I guess, a psychiatrist, on the street where you pay a little bit of money. And this guy is standing there, and he's kind of whining. He goes, I just can't find anything good about myself. And I'm thinking, are you kidding me?
Right.
But people are really like that, though, and it just blows my mind sometimes.
Absolutely. I think it's because they're not aware how they talk to themselves.
Uh-huh.
People just are, they're so identified with those messages that they don't realize they're messages.
Mm-hmm.
And we all have these. There's no perfect mind that doesn't have these, different programs that we're running.
But as you were saying, pay attention to those and see, why am I thinking that? When did I first think that? And does it serve me anymore? And if you can't do all that, you go see Keelan for some healing. That's what you do.
Absolutely.
Now tell us where they can find out more about you, Keelan.
Sure. So you can find me on my website, which is www.joyworkmindbody.com. And then I also have a Tumblr blog, and there's a lot of suggestions for healing and meditation on that blog. And there's also a transcript of some of the things I talked about today, some of the ideas that I had for today. And that's www.joyworkwriter.tumblr.com. And then you can also purchase my book on my website.
Well, Keelan, thank you so much for talking with us about Joy Work. It's been a real pleasure to have you here on the program.
Thank you.
And we also want to thank you, the listeners out there, for joining us as well. You can find out more. Visit us at beyond50radio.com. That is the number 50. We also have our exclusive listener updates you can sign up for as well. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you again for joining us. This is the Beyond 50 Radio program. And remember, live your day past halfway.